is.
Welcome to the Caspian Podcast, the podcast of the Caspian Post with me, Mark Elliott. So hello and welcome once again to the Caspian Podcast with me, Mark Elliott. Today I'm absolutely delighted to meet Polina Dessiatnitchenko. Polina is born in Ukraine. At age 9, she moved to Canada. She's an ethnomusicologist focused on the creativity of Azerbaijani Mugham. She studied at Toronto and then Harvard and has lived in Baku. But now she's currently turning her PhD thesis on Mugham into a book, while at the same time teaching ethnomusicology at the prestigious Waseda University in Tokyo. So, well, we're across the world from each other, but welcome, Polina. How lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm very glad to be part of it.
Now, you may be wondering, viewers, what it is that she's holding there with all those keys and the. Now, tell us what it is. What is your instrument there, Polina?
So this is the Azerbaijani tar. It's a string instrument. It has 11 strings, so lots of strings.
11 strings? No.
Yeah, but actually a lot of them are doubled, so it's not like they're in pairs. And this is the kind of main instrument one of the main instruments in Azerbaijan. It is used to play the Azerbaijani classical modal music called Mugham. And this is what I have been doing my research on and learning how to play on this instrument.
Now, can you lift it up a little bit? Because what's interesting to me is that strange sort of double shape of the sound box.
The resonators, yes. So there are two bellies. And this is from mulberry wood, actually, that is usually seasoned for about 10 to 15 years, so quite a long time. It's a very lengthy process. And the membrane here, this is made from a tissue of the heart that belongs to an ox. So it's actually, it's quite...
So you're saying that's from ox heart, that they somehow take the membrane from the heart. Gracious me. Wow. Now, another thing that I'd heard, and I'm not sure, I'm trying to see on there, the frets. I heard that those are actually made from some kind of gut. Is that right?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And is it true that they're movable so that you can sort of change the tones?
Yes, they're movable, and a lot of musicians do change the tones because depending on what music they're playing, some of them can play Western music on the tar. So that's one thing that really interested me, is that this instrument, you can play both Western classical compositions, for example, Schubert, and you can also play traditional Azerbaijani music, Mugham, that has all of these microtones. And so the moving of the frets becomes important to sort of switch between these different traditions.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite something. How do you ever do that? Or is this that requires sort of centuries of mastery to do?
Well, actually, I took lessons from a number of teachers, and a lot of these music teachers, they have their own views on how the music should be and how the frets should be. So sometimes I would go for a lesson and one teacher would say, no, this is not the right way. And he would move the frets. And then the next day I would go to a different teacher and he would say, no, what did you do? And he would move them another way. So it's constantly, we have to always move these frets, especially if taking lessons from different teachers and trying out different styles. Yeah.
So at this point, I do have to ask you, why, as a Ukrainian / Canadian, did you land on the whole idea of playing the tar and learning about Mugham? What led you in that direction?
So I actually was taking piano lessons in Toronto, and my teacher, Maya Jafarova, she is Azerbaijani, and she's the first one who introduced me to Azerbaijani music. But it was on the piano. It was masterpieces of composers such as Vagif Mustafazadeh and Garagarayev. And I was really interested in Azerbaijani music. And then I began to be involved in all of the various events that were happening in Toronto organized by the diaspora, the Azerbaijani diaspora. And I met one musician from Azerbaijan whose name is Ismail Gadzhiev, and he was a conductor of an chamber orchestra called Silk Road Chamber Orchestra of Canada. And I got to perform with them, playing the piano. And once he invited a Mugham trio from Azerbaijan, and we were performing together. So I got to hear Mugham, I got to perform with them, and I was just mesmerized by the sound of Azerbaijani music, by this instrument. And at the same time, I was also starting my PhD in ethnomusicology. And I was curious about the role of music for humanity, asking questions such as, why do we have music everywhere? What is the role of music for humans? Why is it always connected to these very powerful, emotional, spiritual experiences in the world everywhere? And it's one thing to read about this as a scholar, but it's another thing to get to experience it, And when I started to perform with this Silk Road Chamber Orchestra, and I heard the tar and I heard Mugham, and I was in this moment of performance and seeing this incredible, powerful influence that this music had on the listeners, and also performing myself, it was amazing. And so I decided to focus on Azerbaijani music.
I think this is where we need to hear, as you say, talking about it is one thing. Now, you very kindly suggested that you might be able to sort of walk us through a little bit of some of the techniques. Now, first of all, before we start, Mugham, how would, very briefly, is it true to say that it's mixture of both very traditional and yet somehow you make it up as you go along as well? So there's a sort of like a jazz element and yet a very classical element. Maybe you could probably say this much better than I can.
So there is this, there is this model that exists in Mugham, the standardized kind of system, and this is what is learned. And then as one is performing, of course, this model has to be varied and there has to be improvisation. And this depends on the kinds of audience that is there to listen, and also on this vibe, between the performer and the audience. So there has to be a lot of creativity and flexibility as well, and variation of the model. So it's kind of like jazz. That's a good comparison.
Right. So that must make it incredibly hard to learn, because you've got to learn a great sort of centuries worth of knowledge and yet still be flexible enough to improvise.
Yes. I actually cannot improvise yet. I can just kind of fake it because it takes very long time. It takes maybe, some people say 20 years to actually begin to improvise and find your own style, because you have to learn the whole repertoire, and also there are different lineages, so different schools of playing that have to be learned, and one also has to listen to recordings from the past and sort of accumulate all of this musical material, and then it seems to happen on a more subconscious level, this improvisation. So I'm not there yet, but I can sort of pretend I am. Yeah.
Right. So now, if you said that you might be able to play a little piece for us, but breaking it up to tell us what you're doing.
Yes.
So what? First of all, what is it that you're proposing to show us? What is the name of the piece? Is there a name, or is it just your own creation?
This is a Mugham called Shur. So the Mugham is the modal classical music of Azerbaijan, and this is one type of Mugham called Shur, which means inspiration. It has this affect of inspiration to it. And there are 7 major Mughams in Azerbaijani music, and this is just one of them. So it's like you can think of it as an arrangement of pitches, but it has its own melodies and also affects, emotion.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, super. Now, you have mentioned to me that, and the listeners need to know that just the art of tuning this instrument can take half an hour. So but you've got it as much as we can without spending hours retuning, so the listeners can understand that.
Okay, hopefully, yeah, it gets out of tune very easily. So It's a very sensitive instrument, and hopefully, let me see if it's tuned, and then I
sure.
Okay, that will do. Yes.
Okay. So.
Okay. So this is shur, and what happens in Mugham is that it is comprised of phrases. So we can think of it like language, which is comprised of sentences, and there are these phrases, and every single phrase in a Mugham section will end on the same note, which is the central note. So in shur, the central note is this one here. So as I'm playing, you will hear that the music gravitates towards this main tone all the time. And whenever there is a pause or an kind of ending of a phrase, it will be precisely on this tone.
Okay.
And this.
So what are you doing when you're wobbling? That's not you've not just got some Parkinson's disease. What you're doing that deliberately? What are you?
No. This is called khun. Khun. It translates to something like sorrow, but it's the shaking of the main part of the instrument to produce an echo sound. Okay. And there are many different ways it can be shaken. So one is like this, and then there's one that like this, and there are many different kinds. But the effect is this amplification of sound to create a kind of echo.
Wow.
And this is called lal barmak, which is when I play a note and then I just put my finger on this one, and you can slightly hear it.
Oh, yeah, and then you got a sort of almost bluesy bend in it there as well.
Yes, this is a kind of a vibrato and the bending of pitch.
Yeah.
But you can hear again that it always stops on this tone.
And so when you're doing that bend, you're between the frets, whereas the actual playing is on the frets.
Yes, okay. There are a lot of different decorations that sort of maneuver between these tones, and such as this one, bending of tones. Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Now I can repeat the same phrase. I just played this little phrase and vary it a little bit. So this is what is done when one is improvising. So just a slight variation.
Okay, I sort of follow that. But one thing I notice is it all seems to be at the bottom of the one or two strings. Do the deeper strings not play, or is it?
They do. So this is the beginning of this Mugham composition. Okay. And in the beginning, it always starts out quite high. This is a section called Bardasht, which means entrance. And this is the beginning of a Mugham, and it starts higher up. And then you will hear now, I'm going to descend an octave lower to the same tone, but here, an octave lower. And I wanted to say also that it's very difficult to play this instrument precisely because there is this way of playing which involves the plectrum hitting from the this from the bottom up and also from the top up. So those are completely different ways of hitting the strings, and there are different combinations of going up, down, up, down, down, up, down, just all of these different combinations and patterns. So in this case, for example, I'm not sure if you can hear, but it's down, it's up, down. It's a combination of up and down, and that's why it becomes a bit difficult. But it's always demanded. This precision must be there, you know, even though it's so minuscule and just very detailed, but it has to be there.
Yeah, and I think I bet you that, I mean, certainly I had no idea that there was such intricacy on the plectrum, for example, and that somehow you sort of think about the left hand working, but there's obviously an enormous amount on the right hand as well.
Yeah, it's both hands. Yes.
Gracious me. Okay, lovely. Let's go on.
And this thing I did right here, where I'd go like this. This is called jirmak, which means to scratch. And they also say this is like scratching on somebody's heart, because, you know, this music is very emotional.
Right.
Okay. So this is the end of this part, and you can see that I especially emphasize this main tone with this also. This is the bass string, and it's tuned to the same main tone. This one, it's the same tone. So it's always going to end and gravitate here. And you also heard these fast different insertions, scalar-like passages, and this is coming from the mainstream school of playing, which was created by one tar performer. His name is Haji Mamedov.
Okay.
And that's kind of the mainstream way of playing today, because today the performance on the tar is quite virtuosic, but it wasn't like this before. This was an addition during the Soviet times.
Oh, really? Okay. So yeah, because although it's very traditional, there was a sense in which the Soviet Union did encourage traditional music as within national groups, I suppose.
Yes. And of course, this kind of music was notated, and there were ensembles. There were a lot of reforms, but one change was this addition of virtuosity, and it really became kind of a stage phenomenon, whereas before it was more for intimate performances.
Oh, okay.
Style of playing, yeah.
Wow, no, that is fascinating. Are there any more of these techniques you're going to show us, or shall we move?
Wanted to mention, I also, because the history of this instrument is so rich, there are different lineages. And one particular lineage that I've been very interested in and I've taken lessons in is the Mansurav lineage. There was a very famous tar performer, Bahram Mansurav, during the Soviet times. And I have been taking lessons with his son, Elkhan Mansurav. And this style of playing, the Mansurav school, it's more closer to the way that Mugham was performed before the Soviet changes. So the style of tremolo, for example, this is a tremolo.
Oh yeah, lovely.
There's always this element of the tremolo present, and there's just different pace to the music. There's not that much this kind of virtuosic scalar passages that are added. So it's very different. If you want, I can show the same part of Mugham in this other lineage.
Well, that'd be fantastic, yeah.
this tremolo, this is constantly there. And this is a hallmark of this other Mansurav school of playing.
So, I mean, is that something you had to really seek out, or is there really sort of, I suppose, sort of various fashions in Mugham that so that you going back to the old ones can be hard to find your teachers?
Yeah, actually, yes, not many performers follow the style. It's not the popular one, the Mansurav Lineage. And I was very lucky to find this teacher who is the son of Bahram Mansurav and to take lessons with him. So I can learn from the school.
Yeah, one of the things that you had touched upon was just how different teachers have different styles. But I'm interested how you have gone about learning it. How does a lesson work? I mean, how does that happen?
Oh, these lessons are so long. I mean, they're really, because I have taken lessons in Canada playing piano. And I mean, just comparing the lessons of classical music to Western classical music to this Azerbaijani Mugham is just so much difference. Of course, Mugham is also not notated. There is no notation. So it's all about memorizing. And to memorize a phrase, we might have to repeat it as many as 50 times during a lesson and get all of these details in the right place and all of the timing. And it takes a really long time. And also the teachers actually talk more than they play music, because they explain certain meanings that Mugham carries. A lot of my tar teachers were also experts in poetry, for example, that is sung in Mugham. So they would explain to me some kind of poetical couplet, what it means. And it becomes a lesson in philosophy and kind of lifestyle rather than music. So it's, because this music does carry this philosophical system, and the lessons reflect that. So they're very long. Some of my lessons were like 4 or 5 hours long.
What? 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah. And my teachers would also teach me how to make special Azerbaijani tea and sort of tell me stories and various different proverbs. So it's really, it's quite, yeah.
So it's almost like having a guru rather than having a teacher.
Yeah, actually, I think, yes, you're right. It's like a guru. Yes.
Yeah. And so you touched on the poetry. I think that you were saying that one of your studies is linking Mugham music with the Gazelle poetry. What is Gazelle poetry for a start, for people that don't know?
Gazelle poetry is the classical poetry of Azerbaijan about love. The main topic is love, and it's a short poem that is comprised of about a few couplets. So it's in the form of couplets that have a rhyme in them. And yes, so when I was doing my research, I just began to notice that the things that my teachers were saying, it just seemed like I have to also learn the poetry.
Okay.
Because it was a new challenge for me. But they say things like Mugham, there is no Mugham without words, and by words they mean the poetical text. Even in instrumental playing, so what I was playing even right now, there are all of these elements from poetry, such as the structure of the phrases, and they say that the meanings that the music carries are also same as those found in the poetry.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, I also took some lessons in the Gazelle poetry, and there is, what I heard a lot is that there are these particular gatherings that take place, poetical gatherings, and they take place outside of Baku, in the suburban villages surrounding Baku.
Places like Mashtagha.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Mashtagha, yes.
Yeah.
And Hovsan also. And so these seem mysterious to me because I didn't see them happening in Baku. But my teachers were telling me that to learn Mugham, to know about the history of Mugham, you have to go there as well, and you have to be present. So one day I just got on a taxi and I took my friend with me, and we went to one of these suburban villages, and we immediately found these experts in Mugham, in Gazelle poetry, who invited us over and gave us lots of food and explained to us why the poetry is so important in Mugham, and showed us recordings of Mugham. The thing is that in all of these regions throughout the Soviet era, they had what were known as Mugham weddings. And these were weddings, but the main event, the main thing that was happening at these weddings is this music. And Mugham stars were invited to perform at these weddings, and they could take many days, actually, throughout many days, and they would be performing Mugham, and they would be judged by these experts who lived there, the experts of poetry, who would be judging these Mugham performers. And if they make mistakes and if they're not good, then they would just ruin their reputation in the whole of Azerbaijan.
It does sound like the poor old bride and groom get rather sidelined.
Actually, the reason why they were able to host these weddings is because economically they were very well off. They were trading carnation with Russia, these suburban areas.
Yes.
But unfortunately, today that's not the case. But back then they had a lot of money, and they were hosting these really interesting events. And this was known as the underground Conservatory of Azerbaijan.
How amazing. Well, isn't that intriguing? Oh, wow. I now this might be putting you on the spot, but would you have like just a couple of phrases of one of those poems that you could, so that people could hear just the rhythm and the sound of a poem? Was that being unfair?
Yes, I had to memorize quite a few. So my teachers would say, even if you wake up at night and I give you a line on the phone of one poem, you have to be able to finish it. So it's like,
oh my Lord. That sounds like one hell of a training. Okay. So, well, if you could give us a taste.
Yes, I'll just maybe speak two couplets of this one poem by Fizuli, who was a 15th century poet, and he's still being sung in Mugham today. They sing his poetry. Ney kimi her dem ki bezmi veslini yad eylerem, ta nefes vardır guru cismimde feryad eylerem. Vehm edip ta salmaya sen mahe mehrin hiç kim, kime yetsem zulmü cöbründen ona dad eylerem. So eylerem at the end, this is the rhyme that keeps coming back in the poem.
Now, okay, first little question. Would that, it's 15th century, would that still make sense in modern Azerbaijani, or would that sound like sort of Chaucer or Shakespeare? Would it sound a little bit dated?
There are some words here that are not anymore used in Azerbaijani, some Persian, Arabic words, but there are still a lot of Turkic words, and I think it's possible to understand and sort of find your own meaning in this ghazal, because the whole point is to listen, to use your imagination and to find meaning in it.
Right. Yeah. So again, almost like a mantra, so that it's as much the feeling and the sound of what you're hearing as much as the actual meaning of the words.
Exactly. There's actually a meter. It's very musical. There's a meter underlying this poem, and in this case, it's long, short, long, 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 short, long, 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 short, long, 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 short, long. So if you keep this in your mind and I say it, you can hear this meter repeating.
And so just to bring us back to the tar, then. So are we saying that these ghazal poems are often used at the same time? That you sort of sing them, or you play, or someone speaks the poem and plays the tar, or is it just that they have a certain resonance? They use a similar meter. I'm just trying to work out how they link.
Well, it's all of those things really, because in the performance of Mugham, there was a singer, and the singer called Khanende, he or she is singing this kinds of ghazals, and then the tar player or the other kamancha player, they have to kind of interact musically, and they can take certain phrases from the singer and then play them instrumentally. So of course, the playing on the instruments is intimately tied to the poetry. And as I mentioned, even an instrumental performance without the singing, there's still some elements here in terms of the pace, in terms of the structure of the phrases of Mugham that are all linked to the poetry.
Right. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating. I did want to ask before we go, you've become a little bit of a YouTube star with this incredible video of you. I mean, I don't even know how you did it, but just for people who haven't seen it, we'll put a link if we can on the website. But there's you sitting on the top of one of the Caucasian peaks in the snow, playing your tar with a sort of large number of accompaniments. What's the story of that, and how on earth did you get up there?
So this is a composition that is called Shedrik, and it means little swallow, the bird. And this was a composition that was composed in 1916 in Ukraine, based on a Ukrainian folk tune. And it's about a bird which flies into a house and announces the coming of the new year and wishes for prosperity. So it's quite a famous folk song. That's quite a famous composition. And then it became also famous in the West, which was known as Carol of the Bells. And used in some movies also. So it's quite a known song internationally. And I received a phone call from the Ukrainian embassy right around before the New Year last year. And they proposed to me that we take this piece and we arrange it for Azerbaijani national instruments. And then we create a video, and this will be a present, a gift from the Ukrainians to the Azerbaijanis.
What an original idea. Yeah.
I had no idea that this would involve going so far in the mountains, but of course I agreed. I really, really like this idea. And actually, when we got up there, it was so stunning. I mean, the snow everywhere, and it was about 2,100 meters of altitude near the city of Shamahi in Azerbaijan. And honestly, I forgot about how cold I was, and I was then I realized I'm playing without feeling my fingers. My fingers were numb, but I was just so inspired by the views, and we had a very amazing group of musicians who were performing also with me. So it was really a great experience, and I think Azerbaijanis enjoyed it.
I do have to ask though. I mean, given how easily those instruments go out of tune, did you have to mime it and actually play it in the studio, or is that a trade secret?
But yes, we did. We recorded the sound first, and then when we were up there, we just sort of pretended like.
Well, I was going to say, I would assume you did. And did you need a helicopter or something to get up there?
Oh my goodness, no, but the kind of car that took us up there, it was this humongous car with wheels that were just so huge and it was dangerous because I couldn't even look outside because there were these cliffs and it was icy and snowy.
Well, you've certainly suffered for your craft in many ways, and that's perhaps the weirdest of them all. Polina, thank you so much for joining us. You've been listening to me, Mark Elliott, along with Polina Dessiatnitchenko. Polina, thank you for joining us, and I think you're going to play us out with another little tune. Perhaps what were you going to play us out with?
I can play the Shushanın Dağları. Can I play that?
Sure.
The mountains of Shusha. Okay.
Well, that's very topical, given that it's almost exactly a year ago that Shusha returned.
Yeah, It's a lovely tune, and I've had some time to practice it. So
Lovely. So thank you very much, and enjoy
much
to for all our listeners. Do enjoy the Shusha Mount.
Thank you.